Malayalam cinema, long celebrated for its bold narratives and progressive themes, has recently been shaken by stark revelation. Beneath its celebrated facet lies a deep entrenched culture of misogyny, sexism, and sexual harassment, largely harbored by powerful group of industry insiders. The Hema Committee report has exposed this toxic reality, revealing disturbing power structure that has silenced victims and enabled abuse. In this video, we will explore the larger social and political implications of these findings and examine how such a culture could persist in an industry known for its inclusivity and creativity. To gain deeper insight, I have spoken with historian Dr. Malvika Binny, who has expertise in gender history, history of medicine, Dalit history, among other fields. Dr. Malvika earned a doctorate from JNU, New Delhi, and has taught in prestigious institutions across India, such as Christ University, Bangalore, SRM University, Chennai, Indraprastha College at Delhi University. She has published extensively in international journals and edited volumes, and her work has significantly contributed to discussions on feminist and Dalit issues. Dr. Malvika's research spans a wide array of topics, and she has presented at seminars and conferences across 31 countries. It's a pleasure to have her with us today to share her valuable insights on the Hema Committee report and the wider implications on gender justice in Malayalam film industry.
I'd like to thank Patralok for inviting me for this session. In fact, I think it is important for us to continue the conversations about Hema Committee report and the aftershocks that it has brought to not just to Kerala's film industry, but to Kerala society and Indian film industry in general. Because news cycles and public memory is so short, it is important for media outlets to keep the conversation going, because we are dealing with an extremely formidable task of social justice and women's rights.
How do the Hema Committee report's findings on gender discrimination and sexual harassment in the Malayalam
Mhm.
film industry reflect the broader social issues in Kerala, despite its reputation as a progressive state? And do the progressive themes in popular films like The Great Indian Kitchen and Kumbalangi Nights bring about positive change in the society? Or is there hypocrisy in praising these films while failing to implement those values in our own lives and society?
Mm. I think it's a great question, but it's also a question which has a lot of dimensions.
Yes.
I am someone who believes that Kerala society is a progressive society, despite of a lot of flaws that we might have, despite of not reaching the ideals that we have set for ourselves. I do think that on a relative degree, if you compare us to other Indian states, and even a lot of other nations for that matter, we are indeed a progressive society. The reason why we have a Hema Committee report, and the reason why we are discussing it, the reason why we are ready to take up social justice issues such as that of caste oppression or gender oppression, or that of, let's say, transgender protection, for instance, is because we believe in progressive ideals and there is a space to discuss the same. You will not find these discussions elsewhere. For instance, if you look at, I'm not naming any other industry, but take any other industry other than the Malayalam film industry, they are and have been very slow to respond to the changes that are happening worldwide. In fact, if you look at the WCC's movement, or if you look at the assault of the film actress and the aftermath of it, you can actually chronologically locate it as being prior to even the Me Too movement. So one can say that the questioning of a certain kind of a extremely skewed gender structure, whether it is in the film industry or in the larger society, had actually happened in Kerala way back. It happened like maybe 10, 20 years ago. That is also because there is a formidable section of Kerala society, particularly among its intellectuals, particularly among people who consider themselves to be progressive and liberals, who have always upheld these values and are continually fighting for these values. So usually when we have problems in a house, or in any other place for that matter, but particular within the family, we kind of think of that family as dysfunctional. But usually those are families where, you have a little leeway for discussion, where, children can voice their opinions, where the wife or the mother can voice their opinions. And those are families which have a more democratic structure, rather than families which pretend to be all rosy and cozy and having an absolutely wonderful structure. Usually that structure is a very feudal structure, by the way. So when you have these allegations coming up, when you have reports such as the Hema Commission report, I think of that as a very welcome change, because it's also signal that we are ready for change. And the kind of acceptance, and this is something that you might not have witnessed, let's say 10 years or 15 years ago, the way that the general audience or the public is responding to these allegations. It's a very positive response, where they are not siding with the oppressor, they are siding with the oppressed. I still remember in 2017, even when the actress assault case against Dilip came up, there was unfortunately a certain section, particularly a very vocal section of the society online, who very clearly sided with Dilip, and who went on online rampage against Bhavana. I'm sorry, I mentioned the name, but I think it's okay to mention her name because she prefers to be named. She has, in the past, in the last several months, she is someone who has identified herself as the survivor, and she prefers to be named when we're talking about her. But that situation has changed, where, where this image of the hero who did not have any a kind of flow against him, or this very unsullied kind of a hero image that a lot of our superstars had, that has come under question. If you look at, like, a week ago, you had Mohanlal being questioned, and actually being asked some of the most sharpest questions by media personnel. And I think that's a very positive change, that, spaces are becoming a lot more democratic than they were. People are waking up to the question of injustice. So I do believe that, and I'm also happy as a feminist and as a gender historian and as a teacher who constantly engages with very young students. I do believe that, we are at the cusp of a major social change. What was the second part of your question? Because it was a long question.
Okay, second part is like we have progressive films like The Great Indian Kitchen and Kumbalangi Nights, which bring a positive change in the society. Or is there a hypocrisy in praising these films while failing to implement those values in our own lives and society?
I don't think so at all, because something that we need to understand is, often when we look at any Malayalam industry or any other industry for that matter, we think of that industry as being a monolithic industry. We think of all the filmmakers sharing the same values, or we think of all the filmmakers belonging to a single lobby. I don't think any film industry works that way, and Malayalam film industry definitely does not work that way. You have a set of filmmakers who subscribe to very traditional, very conventional values and aesthetics, and that is portrayed through their films. I don't mind taking names. For instance, if you look at movies by Ranjit, for instance, who is one of the accused in the several sexual allegations that have come up after the publication of the public release of the Hema Commission report. Or you look at movies by Shaji Kailas or Sibi Malay, you will see that, the kind of values, the films that they have made expose, these are extremely regressive values. And there is a certain audience for that. I do not disagree with it. But then there are also a set of very young filmmakers who make films which are based on rather progressive values, whose aesthetic is different, their process of filmmaking is itself different. And Kumbalangi Nights or Great Indian Kitchen, for that matter, belongs to that school. In fact, I'm great friends with some of those filmmakers and their crew, and I could when you talk about how they envision movies or in the process of filmmaking, you would see that there is a lot of democracy even on the sets of those films. So I don't think it is Hippocratic. It is just that, we have different genres of movies being produced. And I, for one, was someone who was greatly impacted by the Great Indian Kitchen, because it showed the kind of invisible labor that women did, and women continue to perform. And thankfully, because it was a time when, COVID was happening, a lot of people actually watched the movie. If you release that movie today, I'm not very sure whether it would become a hit, but because it was the absolute OTP era at that point of time, a lot of people watched it, and it could actually initiate a conversation. Again, Kumbalangi Nights, it could also initiate a conversation about what we perceive as morality, what we call in Malayalam as Sadacharam, and how, you have the hero actually becoming the villain at the end of the movie. It portrayed excellently by Fahad Fasil and through the character of Shami. So those conversations could be initiated, and those conversations have also led to a sea change in the way that gender is being perceived, particularly by younger people. Now, we do have the bulwark of population who are reluctant to change. I am not denying that. But if you look at the age group between, let's say, 40 to 30 or 30 to 20, they are the ones who, if I make a politically incorrect statement in my class, it's my students who question me. And I think that's a great positive change that has happened. That people in general, young people in general, have become much more politically aware about social justice issues. And a lot of it is because of these movies. So I don't think it is hypocritical at all. I think it is indeed the, we call it as the hearkening call of something new.
So when this report came out, I was a bit upset regarding the people from other states respond to it. Okay, now I am relieved that we should welcome it as a positive change.
Of course, see, whenever any revolutionary document has come out in history, and for instance, when the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen came out after the French Revolution in France, do you think that everybody accepted it? Or after the Civil War in USA, do you think that everybody would welcome giving equal rights to Black people? No, there would be a considerable section of the population who would say no. These changes would wreck the society. It would wreck the family structure. And that's a dialectic which will go on for a very long time. But I think even from other industry, for instance, from the Bengali film industry, you do have actresses who have asked for a committee similar to that of the Hema Committee to be constituted there. The Tamil film, several actresses from the Tamil film industry, Radhika, for instance, Kasturi, for instance, have talked about their own experiences. And if you carefully listen to Radhika's interview, you see that she is someone who says that at least in the Malayalam industry, you can actually vocalize these issues. In the Tamil industry, that might not even be possible. Vishal is someone who came out in open appreciation of the report. Now, whether they go for similar mechanisms or they keep quiet about it, that's something that we'll have to wait and see.
Can you keep your mic a bit more closer? In the last moment, it was not that audible. Yeah, fine. Yeah, that was a very deep and nuanced answer. Okay, so I'll be getting to the second question. So where can we place the struggle of the WCC within the broader history of feminism, and not just in Kerala or India, but can it be considered a significant event in the global feminist history?
I do think it has WCC in general has made a great contribution to feminism. It's a small group, but it's also a very vocal group, and it's a very reflexive group if you look at them, because they have also undergone changes. If you look at WCC growth from 2017 to 2018, you would see a certain kind of naivety, and I call it that, in the initial stages. But the kind of growth, the kind of maturity that the women who belong to that group are talking with, I think it's unprecedented in film history. The kind of clarity that Parvati Children has when she speaks, or Sajida Madatil has when it comes to feminist ideals. I think this is something that you will not see in any actor worldwide. So I think they've all undergone a process of reaching and interacting with feminists and other scholars and other workers, which has greatly opened up their own thinking, and that has because whether it is Malayalam film industry or Indian film industry, cinema has a lot of impact on society. It is undeniable. You have scholars like Adorno who have looked at the culture industry and have called it as the most seductive industry of the modern era. And if you look at I am someone who does ancient history, so recent history is 50 years ago for us. So if you look at post-independent India, you will see that cinema has played a huge role in social reform, in our politics. We have had film actors becoming politicians who have gone on to become film actors, so on and so forth, and a certain kind of has written this wonderful book about MGR called The Image Trap of how certain images are formed. Now, you might not restrict it to the field of just a politician turned film actor or film actor turned politician. Cinema shapes our thinking in many ways. The representations of gender that you have in movies impact our day-to-day life. In fact, if you look at how modern day proposals happen, uh, you know, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the way that a man proposed a woman or a woman proposed a man uh, would not be the same as how you would propose your girlfriend, or I'd propose my boyfriend, or I'd propose my girlfriend today. Because now we have a very cinematic way of thinking because it has shaped our behavioral patterns. 60 years ago, we wouldn't know about you wouldn't even think of giving a greeting card or a teddy bear because this was unheard of. But today we do that because movies have shaped the ways in which we regulate even our most intimate relationship. So it has had a huge impact. And because cinema has a huge impact on how we shape ourselves and how uh, society itself is shaped, the kind of shift that has happened in the last few years in Malayalam film industry, particularly because of the interventions by WCC, not just the institution of the Hema Committee, but if you look at WCC history, you will see that there are multiple seminars that they have conducted. I remember that about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a seminar which they held about the Posh Act. So I wonder how many colleges in Kerala or how many colleges throughout India would actually go ahead and actually take the effort to hold a seminar exclusively on the Posh law by now, the prevention of sexual harassment law. So they have taken those efforts. They have made women in cinema more aware about their own rights. And that is what you see in the Hema Committee report also. You not only have actors talking about the discrimination that they face, you have makeup artists, you have junior artists, you have film crew, you have directors speaking about, first of all, identifying oppression as oppression. Now, this is where, women sometimes are not very aware of the oppressions that they face because it is so normalized in everyday life that sometimes you're not even able to identify oppression as oppression. Now, one of the greatest contributions that WCC has done for the film industry in Kerala is that they have made women vocal and visible, which is itself a great stride in the feminist history of the state, in the feminist history of India by extension. But they have also made women very self-aware about their rights, particularly about, workplace rights. And thanks to WCC's intervention, you also have other women from other fields now talking about the need for safe, non-toxic workplaces. Uh, in the print industry, in media, for instance, you have several women now who are now asking for committees like Hema Committee report. several women who do feel that what was thought to be very normal, for instance, uh, the absence of pay parity of different wages being given to different sexes and different genders in several industries are being questioned now. That is because WCC initiated that conversation. Now, you would, of course, have a large set of people who say that this is never going to happen. But the fact that people are discussing this. Now, at one point of time, when 1/3 of the seats in Panchayati Raj was reserved for women, there were people who would say, "Oh, this is never going to happen." When we had the Indian national struggle, there were people in Britain who would say, "Oh, India is never going to get independent because there's so much diversity," and people would fight each other, and India would collapse within a decade. But we are still existing, right? So whenever a people become self-aware about themselves and when they ask for rights, that's the start of a revolution. In fact, a friend of mine, Divya Divakar, who's a journalist as well, she has called the WCC initiated movement as a celluloid revolution. And I do feel that this is indeed the start of a revolution. Maybe it starts with the cinema because it has to start somewhere, and I'm very sure that it will flow. I refuse to use the term trickle down, but I am someone who hopes and who believes that it will flow to the rest of society.
So, how does the report's oversight of intersectional issues such as caste discrimination and impact the effectiveness of proposed reforms? And what crucial aspects might the report have overlooked or underemphasized? As critics argue that the committee's recommendations don't go far enough in addressing the complexities of gender discrimination and sexual harassment in the industry.
I absolutely agree. In fact, this is a question that we should have taken up.
Yeah.
Almost the entire focus has been on sexual harassment as well as the sexual allegations which came up after the public release of Hema Committee report. While those are very significant issues, there are also other issues which are far more important or equally important. On the one hand, Hema Committee had limited agency. It is not a report which looks comprehensively at all aspects of filmmaking. So it has sort of limited itself to certain aspects, and particularly towards women's discrimination. And the some of the issues that the committee faced, for instance, it even talks about the fact that it couldn't even find a typist who was reliable. So there was a certain framework that it had to work within, and that framework might have stifled the report. But having said that, there are, of course, a lot of issues, particularly that of intersectionality, as you mentioned. Caste, of course, is a very conspicuously absent aspect of the entire report. For instance, for the pages which were published, I think there were about 290 pages, out of which I think about 100 or so pages which is redacted. I don't know whether it figures in the redacted pages, but in the pages that we can read, caste is a largely absent phenomena, and I think it has been overlooked. And the oversight might be extremely intentional because it's something that you cannot escape in Indian society, particularly in Malayali society. So I think it was an intentional, it was not just an oversight, but it was an intentional decision. Because if you look at Valsala Kumari's, Srimati Valsala Kumari's writing, Justice Hema, the writings, you would see that these are women who are very academic in nature. In fact, Gramsci is being cited in the report. But at the same time, though they understand hegemony, they do not understand caste. So it's not at all taken up. The issue that Dalit actors or actresses might face, the fact that a lot of these junior artists belong to Dalit Bahujan caste, is, does not even find mention. They talk about the powerful 15 men or powerful 15 people of Malayalam industry who they refer to as a mafia, but it is also a very Savarna mafia. It is also an elite caste mafia. And that's for sure. Because if you read between the lines, it becomes rather clear that you have caste being a major factor, you have class being a lesser factor. and you have a certain set of people who have banded together because of their Savarna identities, who probably became the powerful 15. And these are issues which other actors like Tilakan have talked about. So it's sort of like a public secret in Kerala, but it is Vinayan has talked about it. Jagati Sri Kumar has very openly talked about the kind of Savarna lobby that you have. And like the case of gender oppression, AMMA and other prominent film-based organizations have continually refuted the impact of caste on Malayalam cinema. You have reports after reports and studies and film studies and scholarly reports which continually talk about the impact of caste. So that's a major omission. Another major flaw is that you see three very different and sometimes even very divergent voices in the report. So Sharada and it's a very small portion of the report. So Sharada's portion, for instance, it kind of reflects or it kind of shows a more conservative approach to uh, issues of justice in the Hema Committee report. For instance, Sharada talks about the fact that you have people because she doesn't use the term women. I am not using the term women, but I think it becomes very self-revelatory because she says that people have started wearing non-concealing clothes or very revealing clothes, and that is one of the reasons why assaults have started happening in the film industry. She says that during her time there were no jokes which had double meanings or sexual innuendo. uh, Now the situation is different. She also says that she does not agree to equal remuneration for actors and actresses, or male actors and female actors. So you do have, even within the report, a person who was part of the committee espousing very regressive values. But then you have Justice Hema, who takes a very progressive stand, and but she's also someone who has argued that the ICC, an internal committee, complaints committee being constituted, might not be the most effective way. But the kind of suggestions she had made, whether practically a lot of them can be implemented, is a question. Secondly, whether they go the whole distance is another question that we have to seriously discuss. For instance, it gives very makeshift responses, for instance, to the question of toilets or the question of changing rooms. And there is a heavy, how do I put it? There's this uh, heavy impact of current ideas of morality throughout the work. So these conventional ideas of morality, where the issue of women being objectified is never actually addressed, is something that you see throughout the report. It's sort of as if that's taken as a given that it's not going to change. So women have to sort of protect themselves rather than the employer ensuring women's safety. And it does not actually call for state intervention in regulating filmmaking. So that's something that is required. Even private firms have to obey the law of the land. When private firms are regulated by government rules and regulations, or there would be some apex body which would ask the private firms to act according to a certain set of rules and regulations or give certain rights to its employees. Now, that kind of suggestions is something that I would have expected in the committee's report, but unfortunately, we have not gotten there yet.
Okay, we will get to the fourth question. Given the hierarchical nature of the film industry, how can we ensure that women feel empowered to report misconduct without fear or reprisal? And how do you foresee the industry's power dynamics evolving in response to this Hema Committee report, including whether you are optimistic about the meaningful change or anticipate resistance, as the report aims to address gender discrimination or sexual harassment in the industry?
I am someone who is an optimist, but that does not mean that that any resistance or other kinds of pushback would be absent. they would definitely be there. And being optimistic also means having enough fuel and energy to fight those resistance when they do spring up. And you can very, very easily kind of make a informed guess that this is indeed going to happen. There are going to be setbacks, that it's not going to be an easy road, it's going to be a very rocky road as we uh, move ahead. But at the same time, in terms of women openly speaking about sexual misconduct by their colleagues, in terms of women calling out their oppressors, in terms of sexual predators being identified in general, I think there's a very positive change. For instance, in a interview very recently, which came on one of the media channels, Malayalam media channels, you had one of the survivors uh, asking the media channel not to blur her face because she wanted her face to be visible. She wanted to make a point and she wanted to uh, let people know of her identity as a survivor. And I think that's a very new and a brave stand that a lot of women are taking up. And this is not a very young woman. She must be in her 30s or early 40s. So she is someone who might be from my generation or the generation uh, right before me. So even women from those generations are claiming their identity and naming their oppressors and being ready and willing to take up that fight. That itself is a huge shift because 10 years ago maybe that wouldn't have happened, and most people would continue to say claim that okay, uh, the oppressor might be at fault, but there might be a slight fault with the oppressed as well. You would still have women or men or people who are patriarchal in general claiming that it was because she was at an unsafe place or it was because of the clothes that she was wearing. It was so the responsibility of being safe would have also been understood, not also, it would have been understood solely or exclusively as the prerogative of the victim or the survivor. I think things have shifted now. People are holding oppressors as accountable. People are talking about safe workplaces. I think that's a huge shift. The way that we have started looking at victims or survivors. Um, it is not as if they are not slut shamed. They are indeed being slut shamed. They are indeed being cyberbullied. The female actors of WCC, for instance, if you go to any of their profiles, you would see that they are being abused with the worst slur terms or abuse terms that you can ever imagine. And in the last few weeks, one could see that there were some appreciatory notes, but that cycle is changing now. We have gone back to a situation where Rima Kallingal is being accused, Revati is being accused. And I'm not saying that these accusations were, we kind of anticipated that because it's a part of how things roll out or how things happen in India. Because whenever you have accusations, you have counter accusations happening as well. But we shouldn't also reduce this to certain people. WCC is not Revati and WCC is not just Rima Kallingal. WCC should be seen as a movement of many women and a movement which will actually keep on going. So it should be understood as symptomatic of a set of ideals that we are trying to achieve rather than reducing it to like we had hero worship in the past. It shouldn't become heroine worship. We shouldn't be like thinking of Parvati Tirvoth as this icon who is going to bring about a sea change. No, it is not just a one woman army or a set of women. It's because there was a collective and that collective fought for social justice or collective fought against oppression. So, but as people and as spectators, we have this tendency to idolize certain people. Whenever we reduce a movement to a person, then it just becomes a cult. It no longer becomes a movement. So, it is important to keep the movement going.
So the next question, what strategies can be employed to challenge and just dismantle such misogynistic power lobbies in the film industry and beyond? And how can we ensure continued accountability and progress in addressing such systematic gender discrimination and harassment? And this applies to other industries and sectors as well, not just film industry.
One is to acknowledge intersectionality rather than invisibilize it. You talk to any producer or any director 10 years ago, and they would say that no, women do not have any problem at all. And these are conversations which have happened 50 years ago. These are conversations which have happened worldwide, not just in the film industry, in other places. But what has happened with the entry of women into workplaces in general, not just the film industry? What we see is that the structure has remained pretty much intact. And only entry was given to people who come from the liberal backgrounds or people or women or transgender intersex people into the structure. So the structure was not dismantled, or it was not even made to accommodate these new forces which we pass. But it is because of this heritage that the structure is started. So on the one hand, you have, for instance, a lot of women entering government offices, a lot of spaces of higher education. So the first three generations of women had to struggle to make a place for themselves, and they had to play by extremely patriarchal rules. They had to, quote unquote, prove themselves as being equal to men. Uh, but we have reached a position where, because of this constant questioning by the first generation and second generation women who may have identified themselves as feminists or not, because in fact, one would see that it's a struggle for survival, it's a struggle for proving that you're equally meritorious, and because of this constant questioning, things have changed. I'm not saying that everything has changed, but things have changed. There's a lot more acceptance now. Now, this change that has happened in the government, or this change which has happened in the higher education, that was way more slower to happen in the film industry, because it still had a lot of feudal values attached to it. It still has a lot of feudal values attached to it. And it is only if we break, and then this is a very old feminist slogan that we have, something that Kamala Bhasan used to constantly repeat, but in the case of South Asia, it is only by breaking a culture of silence that women have achieved anything, whether it is the fight against discrimination or oppression or sexual harassment, or more, even very basic human rights. It is only by speaking up, it is only by banding together, it is only by forming collectives, it is only by forming sisterhood solidarities that we have gained anything that we have gained. So, one step is to break the silence of culture, not to maybe to kind of break out from the shell, from the Kulastri shells or the goody shoes shells that we have made for ourselves, to break out from the conventional modes of femininity uh, which have been imposed on us. And I don't think that's an easy thing for an Indian woman to do. It is a very difficult thing for Indian women to speak up, because we have been socialized and conditioned not to speak, whether it is about oppression or whether it is about discrimination. We have been schooled into silence by our families, by society, by our education system, so on and so forth. So, the first step would be to break the silence, and the second step would be to make oneself politically aware. Women, unfortunately, on the one hand, we have been less politically active and aware, and then that's something that we need to address. Unless and until women become a political vote bank, where we can bargain to the political parties about our solidarity. For instance, in its long history since 1956, Kerala hasn't had a female chief minister. And I do think that it's a problem. We call ourselves a very progressive society, but we haven't had a female chief minister. Now, uh, having a top 10 female chief minister will not actually solve all our problems. Even if we look at political participation of women, or the number of female MLAs that we have, or the number of female MPs that we have, other than at the panchayat level, we do not have even 1/3 seats being filled by women, and this is in a state where we have an extremely favorable gender ratio. We have 1,078 women per 1,000 men. So, see, we have a situation where women have distanced themselves from the political arena, and that distancing, I believe, is also because our political parties, Kerala's political parties, have not actually taken the progressive step of including women's issues in their agenda. Now, do women want to be political? I would say yes. That is what you saw during the Shabrimala issue. You had women taking to the streets. You had women who had never maybe held a placard in their entire lives. They were stopping vehicles. They were on the roads. And all of this shows that women are, women in general, they do want to be part of politics. It's just that they've not been given the space. The kind of effort that has gone into making certain sections of the population politically aware, that investment has never happened in the case of women. So only if women themselves take up the decision to become more political, and only if there is political will in terms of inclusion of women in policy making, in terms of formation of governments, in terms of offering them tickets to become candidates in the election, will there be an actual change, with actual tangible change? Otherwise, we will only have limited superficial change. So I think that is a step that we as women have to take, and there also has to be a response from the side of politicians and political parties in general. But at a very simple level, the constitution of ICCs in offices, that can be like the first step that we could take uh, towards women being given a space to at least openly speak about the discriminations that they face, because even in private companies, the HR departments sometimes might not have this kind of power, or might not have the kind of training to deal with gender based issues. So the formation of ICCs can go a long way in thinking about changes in even small or even large workspaces. So that can be like a starting point.
So when we look at the way our superstar responded to this report, Prithviraj refused to acknowledge WCC struggle. Mohanlal and Mammootty did not even speak of women's problem in their industry. And Rajinikanth says he doesn't even know what Hema Committee is. What does this suggest?
This suggests that the superstars are not super, uh, that they're see, I can maybe call them as misogynist as well, or I can maybe refer to them as being complicit in perpetrating misogyny, or at least androcentrism in the film industry. But then these are also people who at least spoke up. There is a larger section which have not even spoken up. At least Mohanlal was ready to face some of these questions, though he did not have any answers at all. Mammootty did post a Facebook. We have set the standard so low that even these responses. I still remember after Prithviraj's initial press meeting, and it was not even to address this issue. It was for some other Super League team that he had, and so he had to answer these questions because these questions were asked to him, and there was so many laurels being showered on Jagadish as well. And for what? For being decent human beings who spoke up about at least some of the problems that their colleagues have been facing for years. And when you had inopportune moments in the past, none of them spoke up. All of them were absolutely silent. It is only when you had an opportunity, a platform, which has been uh, constantly talking about women's rights, finally, having proved their point, when every other factor fell into place, finally Prithviraj opened his mouth, and you had uh, almost everyone in Kerala praising him as if he was the most progressive person in Kerala. It was also very funny for people like me uh, because, as you mentioned, there was a non-acknowledgement of the struggles of WCC. In fact, he tried to kind of, take away the limelight from them, and uh, claim claim that he was the first one who had a ban against him. But it was not for the same reasons, for heaven's sake. These were totally different issues. Even in the Hema Committee report, you can actually see that a lot of male actors were talking about bans, uh, and a lot of female actors were talking about harassment and oppression. Even these male actors who were talking, or directors, or people who belong to the film crew, when they were talking about the bans, they were not talking about oppression. They just wanted a transfer of powers. They just wanted a transfer of power from one lobby to the other. It was not as if they were demanding a structural change. So, I have heavy doubts about male actors who have not consistently been in solidarity with WCC and its efforts from 2017, from the case of the actress assault till now. Suddenly, when they come up with statements in support and in solidarity, I am someone who's rather suspicious. But this has also shown that no, I shouldn't be surprised or shocked that in the case of Malayalam film industry, other than some young actors, particularly young male actors, not many of our superstars have shown social responsibility in general, in terms of their script selection, in terms of verbalizing the most casteist, most misogynist lines on screen. They've not changed much. So this shouldn't be shocking to any of us that Mammootty or Mohanlal or Suresh Gopi behaves in the way that uh, they do now, and that even look at our natural disasters. It's usually actors from other industries who first would declare aid for us or declare support for us, and then after like 10 other actors from Tollywood and Hollywood, give 15 lakh and 1 crore and 35 crore, suddenly Mammootty says, okay, we'll give this much. And these are people who live in Kerala, who have maybe shot in locations like Wayanad, who are very slow to respond to things. In fact, I do feel that they're being shamed into responding. It is not as if they want to actually come out with a response, but so this kind of a slow-paced, nonchalant response uh, uh, to any kind of social change is something that is that's a pattern in Malayalam film industry. They live in glass houses, but they do not realize that they live in glass houses. People have kept them on pedestals and have given them a lot of benefit of the doubt, I think, but that they're being exposed now. It is thanks to, I think, a generation which is constantly, we blame our young people for constantly being online, but it is thanks to that generation that there's a lot of social accounting that is happening now. And these so-called superstars are being called to be accountable. I realized it. Otherwise, these press conferences themselves wouldn't have happened.
The committee's formation and report came after years of activism. What does this timeline tell us about the challenges of addressing such systematic issues in established industries?
I think this is a general problem that we have. Look at how even when we have ICC complaints, it takes years for the complaint to be addressed. But particularly in the case of Hema Committee report, I think there was a fear psychosis uh, for even people who are part of the committee as well as to the government. But this doesn't mean that it should have taken so long. There was a certain kind of, I wouldn't say irrational fear, very rational fear that they had, that this would lead to the dismantling of certain structures, the questioning of people who were considered to be superstars, and even the redaction of those portions. That itself makes a lot of actions very, very suspect. Uh, but at the same time, the people who took those decisions, they are kind of using women's safety, particularly uh, the women who did give their testimonies to the Hema Committee report as the kind of as a kind of cover to argue that it was for the safety of these women that it took 5 years for us to finally release it. No, but my question is, what was done a couple of weeks ago could have been done 5 years ago as well. You could have redacted those portions and published the report. But that it took 5 years might also be a very positive thing, because right now I think society is very ready and willing to actually implement at least some of the major uh, recommendations by the committee. It is also willing to accept some of the claims by the committee. But does that mean that the delay can be pardoned? I do not think so at all. I think it was a very criminal mistake that it took so long. I think it was, uh, you know, but sometimes you also have to decide who to protect and who not to protect. And when you trivialize women's safety, any women's safety for that matter, you are failing as a state. Because basic social contract demands a state to protect all its citizens, irrespective of gender. So, for me, the bigger question is: does the state consider women as secondary citizens, or is can the issue of women's safety be considered to be the last priority for the state government? Why is there no active intervention? Why is that women who have given those reports have to still come up with police complaints for the government to take action? So I do not think that delay can be justified if you look at it in any manner.
So these are all my questions. If you have anything more to say, you can add.
Something that I, because as someone who has been following this report for quite some time, and now there is a barrage of information about the Hema Committee report, the way that it is being represented in national portals uh, makes you, I mean, how do I put it? It makes Kerala seem as a very unsafe place for women. It makes it seem as if Kerala was pretending to be progressive. Uh, it's sort of like, when you have a woke friend and suddenly the friend does something wrong. You get a chance to say, oh, it's better to be traditional and fundamentalist and conservative after all. Uh, but I don't know. I am not someone who subscribes to that viewpoint at all. The first answer. It is because the Kerala government went ahead and formed a Hema committee that we have the reports. It is because there was a thorough study of the discriminations faced by women uh, by the members of the Hema committee, who took an actual effort. Unlike a lot of other committees which are constituted and then the members do not take any action at all, and in the last 1 month or so, you have a report being made out of thin air without any actual interactions with people who are involved. If you read the report, you can see that they have taken great, a painstaking effort to actually record and document. What we see is but a tiny fraction, the tip of the iceberg of the report. It's supposed to be like 1,000 pages long, with the testimonies of a lot of women and men from the film industry. So a lot of effort has gone into it, and the kind of response that it has elicited from Kerala society, all of this shows the kind of values that Kerala has stood for. And it is thanks to the social renaissance which happened in Kerala. It is thanks to our very effective media, which has thankfully played a very constructive role, that we have such kinds of social churning. And that social churning is very, very important for society to go through to renew themselves. And Kerala, over the last 10 years, during the flood situation, we have had a huge shift. During COVID, we have had a huge shift. Even before that, during the Shabrimala problem, we had a huge shift where we are discussing issues of caste. We are discussing issues of gender point blank and in a very forthright manner, which is not being done elsewhere, which I think is a very positive change, because only when we initiate discussions would you have any kind of progressive shifts happening. So I do feel that we are on the right track. This kind of defamation of an entire state, I think there's a larger vested interest at first there, which also has to be called out. Particularly after the public release of Hema Committee report, and there is a lot of focus on sexual harassment. In fact, Hema Committee finds sexual harassment as the biggest problem that is faced by women in cinema. But at the same time, Hema Committee talks about the lack of toilets. It talks about the lack of pay parity. It talks about the near absence of actual contracts being written in the film industry. Now, those are also important issues. Now, not having a toilet when you have to spend 8 to 10 hours on a set, this is a human rights violation. Now, even today, if you go to a lot of, and I have a lot of friends from the film industry, even if today, if you go to film sets, you will see that sometimes women are asked to use toilets from nearby houses. There's no proper toilet facility. And this is something that, like in the case of sexual harassment, producers continue to deny. But this is a major issue, and it particularly impacts menstruating women. It impacts women who are in the menopausal stage as well. And it might lead to a lot of, and the report very clearly states the kind of health issues that women might face when you do not have the lack of toilets. And we need not even go into long sermons about what happens when you do not have a toilet and how it impacts you. But this has not become a major point of discussion for us. It should become a major point of discussion. Pay parity, it is, I've talked to a lot of filmmakers after the release of Hema Committee report, and they cannot even imagine a world where male actors and female actors are paid to a scale, or paid the same kind of remuneration. There would be hundreds of arguments made against you, saying that the male actor would have more star value, and it is the male actor's reputation which brings in the satellite or the distribution, right, so on and so forth. But all of this can be deconstructed. All of this can be questioned. If you gave the same kind of value to both male and female actors, and if there was a scale, it would actually benefit the film industry. This spiking of or the rates which keep on going up and up of male superstars, that can actually be regularized. But nobody wants to actually talk about these issues. So those issues of pay parity, issues of the lack of toilets, the issues of lack of actual contracts, of people not being paid what they are promised, these issues should also be taken up. Because often when we talk about gender harassment, we only talk about sexual harassment. There are other issues of discrimination at work as well, which also makes the environment, the work environment, the workplace a toxic space for women and unsafe. Like we talk about the rape pyramid, we can actually also talk about a sexual harassment pyramid, where when you have even at the level of script writing, women not being included in the process. Women actors actually being given a script in the first place, and when you have female actors demanding a script, that is thought to be an offense by the filmmakers. So all of this adds to the workplace becoming a toxic space, or becoming a very unsafe space for women. So these should also be talked about. The focus shouldn't only be on sexual harassment, while it is rather significant at